coming to the United States, not speaking English. So when they landed in America, 1964 at JFK Airport, my dad spoke fluent Hungarian, Romanian, and Italian, three languages fluently, but didn't speak a word of English. And then, of course, losing his brother, right, was just that. His brother was his hero, right? He was his protector. And so that was such a tragedy. Kids were making fun of him because he didn't speak the language. My grandparents were working so much. So he was a latchkey kid. He'd have to lock up the apartment when he left in the morning, let himself in. So this is his reality. And as I write in the book, he was an at-risk immigrant youth. And in New York City, you could go in a lot of different directions. He was lucky that he found something so positive that he really excelled at. And that was basketball, of course. And he found that at the playgrounds, in Queens, New York. He just went to the park to play, and all of a sudden here's this game, and it started happening for him. And so, he wanted to assimilate. He wanted to make friends. He wanted to learn the language. He wanted to heal from his brother's death. Right. And so basketball became kind of salvation for him. And it took him farther than he ever could have imagined.
So tell us, what are some of his highlights from his career?
Sure. Well, he became one of the best players in the country in high school. And it happened so quickly. And it's interesting because, in my book, I kind of juxtapose my dad's experience to my own, where my birth was literally scheduled around the NBA basketball calendar. So my dad was an NBA player, and I was delivered by C-section, and he had 2 long road trips. And so my parents scheduled my arrival so he could go on one road trip, be there for my birth, go on another road trip, be there for my bris, which is the Jewish ritual of circumcision on the 8th day of life, right? So that's how I came into the world. And I always wanted to play in the NBA. That's all I thought about, because that's what my dad did. So from the time I could remember, I'm going to be an NBA basketball player. And I write, my eyes were fixed on the peak of that mountain, and it's a pretty steep climb. My dad had no such illusions, right? He found something that healed him, that gave him something to belong to, that gave him a new life coming from his country to America. He didn't know where he was moving towards, but he just kept moving. And so became one of the most highly recruited players in the United States in high school, went to the University of Tennessee, was a 4-time All-SEC player, teamed with Bernard King, who's this legendary NBA basketball player, another New Yorker. They were called the Ernie and Bernie Show, one of the greatest duos in college basketball history. A dozen years after my dad arrived in the United States as that little boy who didn't speak the language, he had a chance to try out for the United States Olympic team, and he made the team. And so my grandparents were in attendance in Montreal as he became an Olympic gold medalist for the United States of America, right? Wearing the stars and stripes on the top of the Olympic podium. And you mentioned my book is called By the Grace of the Game, right? And it's clear why we titled it that. Just basketball was just this shining light for him and for our family. And so he was the 11th pick in the NBA draft, had a 9-year career. He was a phenom as a high school basketball player and a phenom as a college basketball player. He was a good NBA basketball player, but he wasn't a great player. He was more of a role player. Had a very successful 9-year career. The last 4 years of his career were spent with the New York Knicks, where he wore number 18, by the way, which is the most symbolic number in Judaism. My dad wore that number. He stayed with the Knicks upon retirement, broadcasted games, quickly became the general manager of the team. So he built several NBA Finals teams, and then was the general manager of the Milwaukee Bucks and then the Washington Wizards. So he spent roughly 30 years as a lead executive of NBA teams, one of the longest tenured executives in NBA history. So this incredible storied career, but you've heard the origin story, right? He fled communism under duress. His parents are Holocaust survivors. And so I'd say more importantly than any of this, he's a great father, right? So I'm so proud of him for all he's accomplished on the court, off the court, but he's a family man, and he's, just someone I'm very proud of.
Not every son of a successful executive can say that. So that does speak volumes. Thank you for saying that.
So I'm an N of one, and that's my data point is my dad. I only have one of them, and I just know how he's been. But it kind of relates to our point before about my grandparents, my grandmother. Family is what the values were, right? And so yes, you pursue your passions, you want to be successful, you want to, whatever that means to you, if it's making money, if it's being prominent, whatever, but there's something more important to that, which is your family and what do your kids think of you. And my dad, he always says, he still to this day, success comes and goes. You could be the best player, you could be the worst player. Your team that you built could be in the finals, they could be in the lottery. Those things happen, but your reputation, your integrity, who you are, that doesn't go anywhere. That's who you are, right? That's what matters. And so that's how he was raised. That's what he's passed down to me.